Imperfect people are all God has ever had to work with. That must be terribly frustrating to him, but he deals with it. So should we.
Guilty as charged. But what about the Apostle Paul? What about the prophet Joseph Smith? What about your youth leader who let a swear word slip during an activity? Hey everyone, and welcome to Latter-day Divers, where we dive into the words of ancient and modern prophets. My name is Will Perez, and I want to dive into a powerful reminder that was meaningful to me today throughout the epistle to the Galatians. Basically, that imperfect people don't make the gospel or the church any less true. You ready? Let's dive. I hear all the time of individuals who struggle to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ or who leave the church because someone, somewhere, at some point in time did something stupid or flat out wrong or that we can't understand from our current vantage point. I took a lot of heart in this reminder from Paul in Galatians chapter 2, verse 17. But if, while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners, is therefore Christ the minister of sin? God forbid. In other words, if you or I, while on our journey to Christ, stumble or falter or come up short, does that mean that Christ is any less merciful or holy or all-powerful? Heck no. Paul continues, "For if I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. I do not frustrate the grace of God. For if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. If I or someone else makes a mistake or even returns to sin, that's on me and that's on them. That doesn't say a thing about Jesus Christ or about his church. Why do we sometimes insist on reasoning that if men and women are imperfect, that the perfect things that they claim to believe in must also be flawed or untrue? That doesn't seem like good reasoning to me. In Galatians 1, Paul reminds us that even he at one point persecuted the church and sought to lay it waste until God called me by his grace to reveal his Son in me. Paul did have poor conduct at one point. He was consistently an imperfect man, and yet he was called by the Lord's grace. And nothing that Paul could do, he later writes, could frustrate the grace of God. Paul's imperfections, or the imperfections of whoever God calls, do not frustrate or cancel out the grace of God or the truth of his word. They do not make Christ or his church the ministers of sin. In the book of Galatians, Paul describes disagreements among the apostles. There's sometimes tension in the leadership, and yet he reminds us that Christ can still live in them and reveal himself through them. The Father still chooses to reveal Christ in imperfect vessels. How cool is that? If he can redeem and use Paul, imperfect as he was, what does that mean for you and for me in the Lord's kingdom? A word in Galatians 5:1 really stood out to me. "Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage." I thought Paul's use of the word entangled in this context was interesting because it's the same word that the Lord uses to describe Joseph Smith. After it was truly manifested unto this first elder that he had received a remission of his sins, he was entangled again in the vanities of the world. Joseph Smith literally fell into the trap that Paul is warning us about. After gaining a testimony of truth and being cleansed by Christ, he again became entangled in the things of the world. Does that make him not a prophet? Does that make what he taught untrue? No, remember that Christ can and does reveal himself in imperfect vessels. In fact, the Doctrine and Covenants continues. "But after repenting and humbling himself sincerely, through faith, God ministered unto Joseph by an holy angel, and gave unto him commandments which inspired him, and gave him power from on high." Paul, Joseph, me and you, mistakes do not cancel out the grace of Christ. Imperfections do not make the church any less true and living. It's all part of the package, and we would be wise to extend the same mercy onto others as we would hope to be shown to us. And I think this is kind of what Paul has in mind when he later writes, Brethren, if a man or woman be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. The truth is that sometimes we place individuals, church leaders, or even ourselves on such a high pedestal that our faith is misplaced. I love this quote by Victor Hugo. To be ultra is to go beyond. It is to attack the scepter in the name of the throne and the mitre in the name of the altar. It is to mistreat the thing you support. It is to find too little papistry in the Pope, in the king too little royalty, and too much light in the night. It is to be dissatisfied with the albatross, with snow, with the swan and the lily, for not being white enough. It is to champion things to the point of becoming their enemy. It is to become so pro, you become con. Let us not champion mortal men or women, especially church leaders, so much that when they let us down, we become their enemy. Let us instead champion Christ, who will never let us down. I'm so grateful for Paul's humility, for Joseph's transparency, and for Christ's grace in letting us be part of his perfect work, even when we don't always carry it out perfectly. And there it is. That's my piece. That's our dive for today. Thank you for watching with me and supporting Latter-day Divers. Remember to like the video, share it, subscribe, come back for more gospel dives, and let's continue to build this community together as we walk imperfectly towards our perfect Savior.